Death blow. Death blow. Death blow.
Hey there, this is Kevin from Collapsed Vein, and you're listening to Death Blow Podcast.
Hello, darker creatures. Welcome to a new episode of Death Blow Podcast. If you don't know me yet, I'm Darkel. I'm an Italian musician and my passion is metal. Subscribe, like and share my videos and click on the bell to be updated with more stuff. Instagram, Facebook and TikTok for more exclusive videos. Click a follow button even there. Spotify and Apple Podcast for the audio version. Today I present you a band from United States and it's a one-man band called Collapsed Vein. This sound is very awesome, but right now I will leave you with the rest of the interview. Hello!
How's it going?
Oh, I'm fine. Everything is fine here. I present myself. This is me, Darkel, and you are on Death Blow Podcast. Welcome.
Right on. It's a pleasure to be here.
I was very curious about your band, First of all, I just want to know the origin of your band and why did you choose the name Collapsed Vein for your project?
So I kind of started the idea of doing this project a little over 10 years ago, probably about maybe 12 years ago. I was working overnight shift at a psych ward at a state hospital, and a lot of those nights I would listen to the music I like, and then the nights that I had off, because I was just used to being up all night, I would usually go on long drives and just kind of drive around the area and take in the scenery and the weather and everything. And just there was a couple times I hit a certain vibe with certain music I was listening to that made me feel like, it'd be really cool if I could do some kind of music like this. And I just felt inspired and started writing some stuff, and just over the years kind of started gathering ideas and writing riffs, and eventually I popped out an album. The name of the band, I was kind of trying to come up with something that I hadn't seen, and that's always, somewhat of a difficult endeavor, because you come up with an idea and then you spend a bunch of time on Google trying to see if anybody else has taken the name yet. There's kind of a double meaning behind where the name came from with Collapsed Vein. For the longest time, I lived in a mining town that is kind of revered for all of the mining of copper primarily and a lot of other metals. And they've got kind of some museums around the area, and that explain a lot of the mining terminology. And one of the terms that they had was collapsed vein. So, and that's usually talking about like they would find a vein of ore, like say copper ore, gold ore, or whatever. And if they dug enough through it to where it became unstable, it would collapse on itself and cave in. So that mixed with the idea of the way a lot of things are in our world today, like collapsed vein as a medical terminology, if you look it up, it usually just is talking about just like a vein condition, but it also kind of is prevalent with a lot of drug abuse with needles and stuff. So it's kind of I've never done any needle drugs, but I'm a little familiar from working in the medical industry. So kind of just popped in my head. I was like, that sounds pretty cool. And I spent a bunch of time looking it up, and nobody seemed to have that name that I could find. So I was like, all right, I'm going to use it. So
I understand that your job is really hard. It's very difficult.
Yes.
And I totally imagine how could be this and how to deal with these people.
I had to kind of back out of it after a while too. Like now I work in IT, but I still work at a hospital. But I worked 14, almost 15 years between mental health and corrections. So it was kind of wearing thin on me for a long time, and it was definitely fueling me with lyrical ideas for mental anguish and pain and everything, because I just saw a lot of it in a lot of people. So totally.
Yeah, and you come from United States, and in particular Montana. What is the main characteristic of this land, and if this contributed to write this album?
So I guess I'll admit I'm a little bit unfamiliar, but I think as far as compared to Italy, like we're a little bit closer to where I live, kind of the Alps kind of area. Kind of, it's really mountainous in this side of the state that I live in. So the part of Montana I live is kind of on the western side, and there's a lot of mountains, a lot of forest, a lot of scenery. And then as you kind of go towards the center and the east of Montana, it flattens out into a lot of grassy plain lands and everything. So we have a lot of really harsh winter. It gets pretty cold and really snowy and kind of hard to traverse during a few months of the year. It's finally just broken that and become really nice out now. So, but I kind of would like to think that it rubbed off on me in some way, because even like a lot of bands from Norway and Sweden and everything, a lot of their music is kind of like reflecting on like cold and bitter and dark and death and stuff like that, and I don't really think that takes incredible hold here in Montana like too much, but it me being a fan of those kind of bands in those genres, that kind of had an effect on me too, and I could draw the inspiration from kind of the same idea where they were getting it too, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally love Scandinavian music and especially metal, so I totally understand that. And how much time did you work on Pain Communion? Let's dive more into this album that you wrote.
Okay. So like I say, I started working on this kind of music probably about 12 years ago or so about 2013. I've been involved in a lot of bands and played a lot of different kinds of, music in general, but, usually metal. The kind I'm usually playing is usually like, death metal, industrial, metalcore kind of stuff. I was in a deathcore band recently. I kind of wanted to start doing something in this idea, and originally I kind of started asking a few people like, hey, I'm kind of coming up with some ideas, would you be interested in doing this? And I would either get kind of blown off, or they would just, I don't have time. So it kind of matured into, a point of like a self goal to like, well, this is kind of my idea, and I've got plenty of other kind of bands that I play in that I can exercise my other interests in. Let me see if I can pull this off myself. And it's kind of weird because you don't want to, like, or at least for me, I don't want to like make it like a pretentious project and oh, look at all the work I'm doing. But at the same time, like, I kind of want to acknowledge myself a little bit and say, hey, look, I did all of this on my own, and if nothing else, I'm showing myself to myself and others, that I can kind of put my money where my mouth is and say, like, I have some experience and I have a little bit of knowledge and a little bit of drive and work ethic to do this kind of thing for a band, So if I can prove that with myself, then I'll, be able to show that, to other bands that I'm involved in too. And so I just kept working and kept coming up with ideas and watching over the years over like, different kind of things I could submit to and different kind of, efforts that I could make to kind of make the biggest impact when I came up with this, and right now, but the biggest limitation is money. So I'm doing the best I can with what I got. but I don't think I'm doing too terrible right now. I feel like I'm making all the effort to reach out and put those efforts in front of everyone. I was able to get in contact with you and a few other media outlets to kind of push this project. So it's coming along, and it's been a lot of work for many years. Just as I would go through my ideas and everything, I'd go, well, I kind of want to do this, and I would start incorporating, the nucleus of what kind of sound I wanted. The biggest influences I had for it were bands like Yob and Triptychon, Neurosis, Crowbar, stuff like that. And just over the time, I was like, I want to do this. Like, I guess like one of the biggest, over the years kind of ideas I was a little unsure about was the incorporation of all the organs and the choir, because I kind of wanted to give it a vibe of, like I'm stealing something that's kind of integral from like the church music environment, like when you go into a cathedral and everything. So it kind of resonated with me on this. So I was like, there was a few times I was like turning it off. I'm like, I don't need all that, but ultimately I decided to keep it. So that ended up influencing the overall sound in the end too. So.
Yeah, you play death doom metal or funeral doom. It's very well done in my opinion. Do you like to remain to play this type of genre, or would you like to evolve in other musical forms?
I would like to continue fleshing this idea out. I think I had a lot of fun doing it. It was actually pretty challenging because the overall sound of the music, like I think especially nowadays, it's really easy to kind of get into a formula of like, well, I want to sound like, all these new hot, really processed bands and kind of just go out and buy plugins and programs and kind of make that. We're kind of getting to the point where a lot of bands are starting to sound the same with that sort of aspect. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Everybody likes what they like, but this project was a challenge, and it kind of gave me, a little bit of a goal to go after, because even though we live in the computer age and I did use computers and everything, I really did try to keep things as organic as possible, and I had a lot of challenges to try to get the sound I was going for. And like I tracked drums myself, I played the drums myself, and I made sure I played through real amps, and I had to spend a lot of time, playing with all the EQ and everything to try to get to where I was happy with it, in the end. And, there was a lot of effort that I put into it, but where this kind of music, doom isn't really known for being very technical or everything. It's really just about vibe and overall mood. I was pretty happy with being able to pursue the difficulty in making it have a vibe over worrying about how hard this guitar scale is gonna be or anything like that. Like instead of trying to show off musicianship, I just wanted to make it to where people can just enjoy the overall sound, and I think I got it so far.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I just to kind of cap that off when you're asking about playing other stuff, like I play in a lot of other kind of, I play in probably 5 other bands right now too, and I get my chance to explore all the other stuff I want to do, so that, I also I do some session musician things. Like I recently recorded some guitar solos for a country artist here in Montana, so I can exercise any kind of other sound I want, but this being kind of my personal pet project, I can really just focus on how exactly I want this to be, and we'll see how it goes. But to answer that last part, sorry.
Between your main influences, we find bands like My Dying Bride, Type of Nothing, And what are the bands were your main influences into this record?
So yeah, like I mentioned, Yob, Neurosis, Triptychon. There was the last Celtic Frost album, Monotheist, like where they had disappeared for a long time, and then when they came back, they were like ultra heavy and had that doom vibe going on for them. Bands like Esoteric, um, like I said, Crowbar. It's kind of ended up being a little bit of a blend between like Funeral Doom and kind of that like hardcore stoner metal thing that like Crowbar does, and bands like I Hate God, and a little bit more of the southern sludge kind of bands. There's a lot of stuff I like from the genre, bands like Indian. I'm gonna space because now I'm having to come up with band names, but yeah, just and ultimately, the top tier, the one that bled down to all of it was Black Sabbath. Like I would have never been the fan of Doom I am today without hearing like Master of Reality and Sabotage when I was really young. So, I've I mean, those are the kind of bands that I was really influenced by along the way. Just
Your project is a one-man band. Is it supposed to become a band one day, or you feel fine just to be a one-man band?
I figured I would at least try to pull off, one album, doing everything myself. If it continues as just me going down the line, I guess that is fine. There's a good amount of bands out there that are of notable name that, even though they are known for being a quote band, there's usually one or maybe two guys that are the main driving force of the group, and then they kind of have people that are just in the group and don't really do anything other than just minute contribution, or they have a revolving door of hired guns and people that just fill in and stuff like that. So I mean, that's kind of a reality to me, that if it ends up being like that, it's okay, because a lot of bands continue to exist that way. I kind of don't know yet what's going to happen. I kind of hope that by the time the album comes out here in a couple weeks, that there will be enough interest dredged up to where, I mean, I have already received a lot of requests like, hey, are you going to play live with this? And it's like, well, maybe. We'll see. I don't want to just play any random shows that are just asked of it. I kind of want to make events out of it if I'm asked to do any kind of shows, and I actually put together a lineup that's worthy of, putting on a good performance and feel like we're all a really cohesive unit for it. And, if that sort of thing can be achieved and it gets the due respect that makes it feel like it's worth pulling out and doing some live shows with, then yeah, I'll pursue it for sure. If that sort of energy kind of continues within the members, or if I'm able to find anybody else that seems like the right fit for it and we can kind of start collaborating on that, that'd be great too. I'd really enjoy that. I've got a few people that I've been poking for a long time, like, hey, you should do this with me, you should do this with me, and sometimes it just depends on what's going on in life, and they're just unavailable, and I get it, because I tend to be unavailable for a lot of stuff too, especially with all the projects I'm already in. So, but at this point, it's just kind of a time will tell thing. We'll kind of see how much more interest dredges up after the album release, and see how well it's received, to figure out whether it's worth putting in those efforts. So
Yeah, what about the lyrics that you wrote about this record?
So lyric writing is kind of a little bit of a newer process for me. I usually was really self-conscious about writing lyrics, and I'd write something and I'd just be like, no, this is trash, and throw it out. And I think I finally kind of developed into a place where I can maybe kind of start writing some lyrics here and there. And the kind of the jump to say, like, yes, I'm going to write the lyrics for this and everything kind of came with that idea of like, okay, I think I'm just going to do this one by myself. So that was like one of the check boxes on the project is like, well, if you're going to do this by yourself, you got to do this and this and this too. So I had to kind of mentally prepare for that and come up with some ideas. And there's a couple of the songs, like I kind of couldn't really come up with anything good, so I just like kind of found some stuff I was interested in. Like for example, the first track on the album, Cadaver Synod, is literally about the Cadaver Synod, which was a historical event where they dug up a dead pope and put him on trial for all the stuff they didn't like, and made somebody else sit there and take the verbal lashing for the dead pope's actions that are sitting there. So it's like kind of a really odd occurrence in time where they thought that was okay to do. And really the lyrics for that, like, it's almost just like an alliterative telling of what happened, like just like they did this and this. Like I just kind of garbled out a story, told it in lyric format. There's the second song, Piss Grave, that's kind of just a song about, like, I got the name idea from, there's a band that's called Piss Grave that I kind of like, and I was like, that's kind of a funny topic, and so I kind of just like took the name and just like ran with the idea and wrote lyrics about, like, what if I hated somebody so much that I would just really process this deep thought about what it would be like to have that action take place and everything. The song Deviant Burial, the lyrics are about like when archaeologists start digging up like old burial grounds and stuff, and they're looking for historical data and to look back on and say, here's what they did back then, and they would randomly find some weird things in the grave with people, like like they would find a corpse that was like wrapped in chains, or they would find them with a huge rock in their mouth, or like some crazy nails through the hands and feet, or whatever. Like they would like be like, what is going on here? And a good amount of the times that they would find that, they would research into it and they would determine that there was like a superstition that the dead could return, like kind of like vampires or zombies or whatever, and they engaged in rituals to try to like help ensure that the dead would never come back out, and so those are kind of some ideas that just I was like, this is interesting, interesting human behavior that I wanted to kind of write some lyrics about. And there's probably about 2-3 songs that were more about personal experience. One, Inevitable End, that's kind of about a friend of mine that died. It isn't like directly about it, but kind of more like a in the third person idea of that scenario, because some of the lyrical content for that song kind of it almost sounds like I would have been there questioning somebody, but I wasn't there when it when she died. So it's just kind of a stand back thought about it. Some a couple of the songs are just about like inner torment, inner conflict, and do you feel like you're doing enough in life type of thing. Will you be remembered when you die kind of ideas. So I kind of just came up with some thoughts like that and worked on some ideas over time. I don't know. I can't be the only person that does this, but I started a little bit with like kind of trying to find patterns in other songs and trying to see if I could fit those patterns, like almost like singing somebody else's lyrics over my song, just to try to find like the kind of movement and go, okay, that kind of works. But then totally yank that at least I have the where the syllables fall at that point, and then go, okay, strike all the words, write my own thing now that I know how I want the words to fall and everything. So just kind of took that kind of approach with it for a lot of the music. So
Do you have a label right now?
I technically do not. I have been putting on things that I'm releasing it through Executioner 213 Recordings. That's my recording business that I do. Like it's kind of a side business. I've been recording bands and projects of my own for almost 20 years now, and have been using, you might see this thing on some of my pictures and everything. It just happened to be here. That wasn't a convenient product placement, but that's like my business for doing things related to my recording and putting out music that I do. Like it's my YouTube channel and my page and everything. I have that logo type of thing on it, and it's not like I actually run an album label, but it's also doesn't mean it isn't either, especially if I'm just self-releasing something. So I did talk to a couple labels just to kind of get my feet wet with having those discussions, and one of them, he seemed like he might have been kind of interested, but he also runs that label just kind of by himself, and he was like, I don't know if I could put the time and effort into this time, but keep in touch with me, maybe on your next release. And he's like, okay, that's cool, and then, that might have been a diplomatic answer from him, just to kind of, I want to stand back and see how you do type. I don't know for sure, maybe he literally was just not in a place to work with anybody at the moment, but otherwise, a couple of the other labels I submitted to, they were just like, yeah, good luck. Okay. So, but I didn't really get any like negative responses from anyone, just neutral or, positive, but not right now kind of thing. And I didn't really expect any different. I don't really think that it's necessarily a easy pitch to try to get some label to sign your solo doom band that hasn't put anything out before. So I just kind of, threw a couple pitches, and I was like, yeah, they're probably not going to bite. And they didn't. And all right, so that just kind of puts the responsibility fully on my shoulders, and, whatever sort of traction it does or doesn't get is purely on me at this point, and that's fine. So that was pretty much where it ended up with, if I was able to get a label support, like, I guess the biggest goals I would have enjoyed out of it would be just some promotion and maybe like whatever distribution outlets are available. But we have those available to unsigned musicians too. So I'm just capitalizing on all those kind of platforms myself, and, doing my best with it. So.
Yeah, I really hope that for you in the future you will be signed, or you will have the best luck in the music, because I really mean that you deserve that. I really saw the direction you're making, and I think that will work very good.
Awesome. Appreciate that. Thank you.
When I think about doom metal, of course, I think about Candlemass, one of the pioneers of this important genre. Do you know them? Yep. Or do you support them, or maybe you support other type of bands that are in the same music genre?
Absolutely. I'm a pretty big fan of Candlemass, actually, and it's been really interesting watching Candlemass over the years kind of mature into with the different eras that they had, like, starting with Messiah Markolin. Well, they didn't start with Messiah Markolin. What was his name? Jens, the first singer? I mean, it's a great album.
Johan. Was it Johan?
Johan. That's right, Johan. So, and then Messiah for many years, and then on to Robert Lowe, and they're still going. And that's definitely evidence to me that, like, even though I'm not doing like specifically that kind of doom, like, even though I really enjoy Candlemass, they were definitely seminal to the kind of thing that I do. Like, maybe not like 100% directly for this project, but there's definitely, like, when King of the Grey Islands came out, the first one that Robert K. Lowe was the singer on, I listened to that album a lot when it came out, because I was a big Solitude Aeternus fan for a while, and I had actually even, funny enough, I had messaged Robert K. Lowe a long time ago, probably about, it had to have been probably 10 years ago, asking if he had any interest in either singing on this album before I knew what I was going to do with it, or, doing a guest spot. And I think if I remember, I think he was like, I'm kind of busy right now, but we talked about it later, and I never heard back from him. I did also at one point send a message to Mike Scheidt from Yob, and he never responded. But so those were, like, kind of just naive pitches to be like, hey, maybe I get a hero to sing on this album or whatever, and figure out what it takes. And so Candlemass is definitely, a band that I like. So the fact that I decided to go with like a little bit more of a harsh vocal style, maybe it's a crutch for me because I don't really like the way my voice sounds. I don't think I could sing very well. So, obviously it's easier to growl than it is to sing pretty. And so that kind of vocal style wasn't going to work for me, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I don't feel like it's not like an influential thing. I wish I could sing like that.
I just listened Children of God, this single, and I think that is amazing.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I guess my question for you, being from Italy, is at the end of my song, at the end of that song, I do a bunch of speaking in Latin. How bad is it?
I really didn't notice. Despite I am Italian, I don't speak Latin. I know very few Latin words.
So I know Latin is not Italian, but I know it's a lot of like derivative Italian. It's kind of a like a matured version of Latin, that grew out of that. So the inspiration for the end of that song, I mean, that song in general is kind of about like, religious institutions kind of force feeding, like I'm not necessarily against people having like a higher power, but I also kind of don't like how religion rules the world and, has definite control over the money in every country and stuff like that, so that's kind of what Children of God is about. But at the end of the song, I kind of wanted to do something that was similar to like a mass prayer, so it's like, they would say like part of the prayer and then I confess, part of the prayer and I confess. Like, I kind of looked all that kind of stuff up just from like my knowledge of it, and took the idea of what kind of things were being said, and then, the group would say, I confess, and then I abominated it. kind of to say, like you're ultimately responsible for your own deeds, type of thing. And that was really what I was trying to go for there. And I mean, it's more just like, poetry and song, it's not like I actually am like that convicted about making people feel bad or anything, but just not much different than a death metal band writing about serial killers. They're not actually, advocating for that sort of thing, but maybe a little bit.
What about the artwork of this record?
So, with one of my other bands, which is, that band is called At Home in Hell. A long time ago, I kind of became a fan of, I guess, what they would call woodcut art. And it's like an old world style, and like I think I kind of started becoming a fan of that from Machine Head put out an album called The Blackening that has an artwork, it's just black and white and has, this artwork of like a skeleton king type of thing. And then I thought about it like, oh, Typo Negative has some artwork like that too, and it's a bunch of skeletons dancing around a grave. I kind of started getting into artists like Albrecht Dürer and Gustav Dorr. So that kind of like, just kind of black and white line work, that kind of old school style of art. And kind of the more and more I became fascinated with that kind of artwork, I wanted to kind of see if I could find an artist that could do that kind of artwork. And I would look at stuff on Instagram and everything, and I finally found an artist that I liked. And he's actually out of Indonesia. His name is Seption. He has a website called Illustranesia. And when I found him, he was pretty, I'm not going to say he's unknown by any means, but he didn't have quite the ramp of attention going on then. I had asked him to do the artwork for At Home in Hell. I was just trying to think if I got an artwork here album. I think I got one. So, I don't know if you could see this, but I had him do this artwork. And, because that was originally, like, we had this kind of logo with the band before. That was kind of it was like a body with no face doing this prayer hands thing, and the way that it was drawn was like to where it looks like a skull or like a jack-o'-lantern.
When did you understand that music was the most important thing in your life?
When I was about 10 years old, my dad had a guitar. I actually have it. It's sitting back there somewhere now. But he had a guitar, but he was never serious. He just had a guitar so he could just dork around whenever he felt like it and make a little noise. At one point, I don't remember why, but he put the guitar in my room. Like he just put the case in my room, and I had come up with some idea that, because I was really not confident and kind of a, awkward child growing up. I didn't have a lot going on. I had this idea that I wanted to play like Metallica at the time, because I had, it was after that song One came out, I had that in my head as a kid, and I was like, I'm going to learn how to play that. Not really putting much thought into the fact that there's a whole section of music before that I was just going to be impressed if I could do just that chug part. So that kind of like sparked a little bit of interest in wanting to learn more and more. I became a bigger fan of like Randy Rhoads. I wanted to play guitar like Randy Rhoads for a long time. I've got a classical guitar up here, because I took classical guitar lessons when I first started taking lessons. I wanted to learn classical because I wanted to learn correctly, first. But it just kind of took hold of me, and I've been playing for like 32 years now, long time, and sometimes I wonder why I'm not better for having played for so long, but I don't think I'm terrible, but I'm not like, there's a lot of music nowadays, like a lot of tech death, it's just all,
Yeah.
I can do some of that, but I don't rely on it too much. I'm more riff oriented. I grew up, the stuff that like really made the solid impact for me was like when I finally got shown like like Carcass and a lot of like the Scandinavian stuff like Entombed and I got really more interested in like kind of just overall power and, you know, that sort of vibe, you know, instead of, you know, how fast of a solo can I play forever. And there's definitely bands that impress me, you know. I am one of those guys that's mad that Necrophage just disappeared off the face of the earth, but I just, you know, wanted to be able to write stuff that kind of grabs, you know, and sometimes I think I do okay with it. But yeah, pretty much started as a child, and I also had a little bit of influence too from, I had an uncle that died when I was probably 3 years old, and he was a musician. He was a bass player, and we ended up with his bass rig, his bass amp, and his bass at my house. You know, my parents kept that. And along the way, like as I was blooming into, you know, this budding musician, I also kind of started getting this idea like, well, I'm gonna carry his legacy type of thing, you know, like. And it's funny too because people will show me pictures of him from back then, and this, you know, he died when in like 86 or 87 or something like that, so it's been a long time. And people will show me pictures of him, and I resemble him so much, so I'm like, wow, that's kind of scary. And so yeah, sometimes I feel like I'm carrying the torch in his honor, but yeah.
Yeah, right now, add something to finish this interview, something that you want to say to the public.
I appreciate you for having me on, and I am very excited to put this album out and hopefully get it, you know, in front of as many people as possible. I've been trying to put as much, you know, out into the world right now with this album. So if you like what I do, I appreciate you checking it out. Hopefully I can get some more out soon. And, you know, thank you for your support.
Thank you so much to have been with me into this time together, and I hope it has been the same even for you.
Absolutely. I appreciate you very much for having me on. Thank you.
Support Collapse Band, guys. Bye.
Yep. Thank you very much. We'll see you.
And that's all for this episode of Death Blow Podcast. Subscribe, like and share my videos, and click on the bell to be updated with more stuff. Instagram, Facebook and TikTok for more exclusive videos. Click a follow button even there. Spotify and Apple Podcast for the audio version. See you soon, guys!